Year six. We're going to carry on our learning today now by looking over some elements of the word biome so that we understand how the world's divided up into these biomes. Over the next few weeks within our geography, we're going to look more and more at broadly what's located within those biomes and where those biomes are located. We're going to go into a bit more detail with one or two types of biome each week and compare and contrast them. Today, however, we're looking broadly at the whole of the globe and we're thinking about where the different biomes are located and maybe starting to think, hang on a second, I wonder why that biome's located there, or I wonder why people then reside there or people don't reside there. Okay, so we're going to think about ecosystems and biomes today. To be successful, we'll identify what they are, so identify what ecosystems and biomes are. We'll understand some of the features of the key biomes as we go through them. And then we're going to do a bit of map work as geographers where you identify which countries are located within which biomes. Okay. So that's going to be our collective work at the end of this. Right, guys, a little bit of a bit of recall. Now, some of these things, so the red elements of this, I think you're going to know. I'm hoping you'll know the yellow element of this, and I'm intrigued to see if any of you know what the purple element of this. So, if you try and think about the words which might be indicated for the upper part of the map, the lower part of the map, so that's the two red elements, then the yellow element which cuts horizontally across the middle of the globe, and then finally the vertical arrow, which is the purple one. So if you think you can identify which four words or four phrases go in each of those, have a go at writing them down now. Okay, pausing now. And let's see how you did. So some of you will have spotted that the northerly part of the globe is the northern hemisphere. So hemisphere is half the sphere being the globe on which we reside. The southern hemisphere then is the part beneath the equator. And then finally, we've got the prime meridian. Now, prime meridian is the one phrase that I would have expected some of us to struggle with. The prime meridian is the point which, if there were lines drawn on the outside of the globe, there's a point which cuts vertically between the point when we draw on maps, the lines of latitude. So longitude. So the points of longitude are the points along which we measure distance from other points along the map. Okay, and the point which cuts through Greenwich in London and other points, as we see that vertical red line, that vertical red line is called the prime meridian. The prime meridian. Okay, that's almost the point that it was like a chocolate orange. It had cut right through the middle. Okay, it's not, the globe isn't quite like that. But if it did, and for the purposes of map reading, sometimes we think of that prime meridian being the point where we cut through the middle of. Okay. Thinking about ecosystem, as I say today. So ecosystem then, it's a biological community of interacting organisms and their physical environment. So it's not just what lives there, it's the habitat which they reside in and the links between the habitat and the things which grow within the habitat and the beings which live within it. This links nicely to two or three topics that we've looked at. Obviously, we're doing our classification in science at the moment, and it links really well to that. But it also links really well to our adaptation and our work on Charles Darwin in inheritance that we looked at earlier in the year. I know Anna Lee, you thought a lot about how things might have adapted to their environments, and that links really well as we understand some of the homework. I remember that Imani did, that Ines did, that Fatima, Anna Lee, and you, Malia, did, looking at all these interrelations of these animals, how one begat another, and that links to how our biomes affect the beings which live in the environments. If we look at ecosystem, then it's got eco, so thinking about ecology, and then system is the structure. Okay, so there's two elements that word. A couple of ecosystems here. So the one on the left is the aquatic one, so underwater, and then we can see a forest biome, forest ecosystem. So the animals which reside there. If we think to our work on Peru and how certain animals no longer resided due to human affectation of the biomes. A synonym for ecosystem is networks and systems. So it's all linked together. It's that idea of linkage between the two. And an antonym would be maybe random or just disconnected. Okay. I find that antonyms quite challenging. I don't know if you guys do as well. When I'm trying to generate ideas for antonyms, I find it harder to think of things that are disconnected rather than those that are connected. Things that are the opposite are sometimes harder to think of than things that are related to the original one. All right, guys, and then the marine ecosystem. So, if we look above, the marine ecosystem is comprised of all living organisms that exist in bodies of salt water. So, we talk about marine biologists and marine life being fish life that's based in salt water. So, the marine ecosystem is comprised of all living organisms, so whether they're plant or animal, that exist in bodies of salt water. Bodies of salt water being there, like seas or oceans. Okay, guys. The biosphere is this thin layer of air, land, and water on or near the Earth's surface. So it's almost like this little shell, but not a shell, but it's made of oil, sorry, made of air, land, and water on or near the Earth's surface, in which all living things on Earth exist. So if you look at this, we've got our sphere, and the reason that went red, sorry, it went in the wrong order. The sphere, although this isn't a sphere when we look at it here, but the idea is the sphere of the Earth. The biosphere is almost this little sheen around the outside of it. The biosphere is the thin layer of air, surface, and water where everything lives on. Okay, everything on the outer side of the Earth is alive, is in the biosphere. Okay, now the biosphere is made up of the air, water, and land. And then the biome is the natural area of plants and animals. Okay, so there's lots of different biomes, and we've talked about the biomes and the ecosystems. But the biomes are all different depending on the climate. Now, if you remember from last week and the previous 2 weeks, we looked at climate and how the water that comes from the sky, so the precipitation, and how the temperature varies in different locations. So, Malia, I know you did some fantastic work presenting that data in a line graph and looking at the different continents' temperatures. And if we think about that's part, the different climate reflects or relates very closely to the different biomes. So what can grow in a location stems from what the temperature is. What can grow in a location stems from what's in the ground. And a lot of the time the ground is related. So what kind of soil there is very closely related to what kind of climate there is. If it's a very dry soil, it's because it's in a very dry area, where like an arid area or a desert area where there's very little rainfall. If it's very moist soil, or even in the tropical rainforest, then the moist air and the moist soil allows different plants to grow and different life, different organisms to flourish. Okay, so biomes. So we've got some different pictures of different biomes here, and we can see that lots of things were alive in the first two, and we can only really see two or three things alive in the second two. However, we can see just really starkly the colours are different, but we can see different things are living there. But we also can intuitively, just without being geographers, without being scientists, we understand why the things which are alive, the camels and the people in the fourth one, wouldn't be able to survive in the marine environment, which is demonstrated in the first one. We can't swim underwater for hours and hours. Similarly, we understand maybe by looking at the third one why the polar bear wouldn't survive in the forest, can't climb trees, or if it can, it would then be seen. Its colouring would no longer offer it this camouflage, which it has due to adaptation in the wintry polar outback. Okay, and that's therefore why different animals can thrive in different locations. They're the largest divisions of the biosphere. So that biosphere is almost split up, like cut up, like into little areas. And as we say, the temperature and then the precipitation are key in deriving what type of organisms can flourish in a location. Okay. There's the main biomes of the world. So there's these different ones around the world. We can see these in this diagram. And we'll go through where they're located in a little bit, and you're going to do some work thinking about which countries are located within which biomes. One thing you might spot on this is that horizontal line of the equator. Now, you might hopefully started to notice that there's certain biomes which are located close to the equator, such as the tropical rainforest, such as the desert, but there's certain biomes which are located a long way from the equator. So if you're looking for the ice sheet and the tundra, that is not located close to the equator. So you're then thinking whether that's because it's hot or cold. Well, if it's close to the equator, would it be hot or cold? Hot. So therefore, if it's far away from the equator, it's likely that the temperature would be lower, and therefore the cold temperature allows for different biomes to have evolved over many years, many thousands of years. Okay, so it's difficult. We talk mainly about six types of biomes. biomes, and we're going to look at 6 over the next few weeks. There are different ways that people break them down. So there's the idea of the aquatic one. We talked about the marine one. And so there's two elements to the, so we can classify them. If you think of Carolinius, we can classify the aquatic biome in two ways. The salt water, which is the water within the sea primarily, and the type of water, if you accidentally drink it, it tastes quite difficult to consume. And then there's fresh water. Now, lakes and rivers inland always have fresh water in, and therefore the type of organism which can flourish there, both plant life and beings which are sentient, such as just fish, the type of organism which can flourish there is different. Okay, so the different type of fish live in seas to that which live in lakes and rivers. So we've got those two types. Then we've got the desert. Okay, so desert is about 1/5, so about 20% of our planet, very dry. Okay, and very little rainfall. So if we looked at that temperature, sorry, the precipitation data from 2 weeks ago, would have seen very little rainfall in desert locations. Okay. Now, forest, there's different types of forest, and when we look at that picture of a forest, it may be linked to our idea of a forest. But then there's also forests which are called deciduous, okay, which lose their trees in winter during winter. So some forests don't lose their trees in winter, and then some that do. So this is kind of split of uh, coniferous and deciduous forests. And we'll look at those language points as we go through, specifically in those biomes. But then within forests, there's more than one type of forest, is the point. Just if we put the biome as forests, not every forest's the same. Not every type of animal which can flourish in that forest would be the same across the globe. We've also got the idea of grassland. When I was looking for pictures of grassland to illustrate this, the ones that basically come up are ones from Africa, ones that make me think of the Lion King, really. They make me think of this idea of huge grassland, and it's a huge grass that grows, and it grows because it's hot, humid and wet. Okay, rather than the short grass which is quite in quite dry places. So my perception is of one type of grassland, whereas there's actually more than one type of grassland. Again, all of the grasslands, as Linnaeus would have talked about with the organisms he was thinking of, all of the biomes can be broken into multiple subsections. They're just kind of broad brushstrokes which can indicate some elements they've all got in common. Rainforest, then, we've talked about a lot. We've talked about it in the context of Peru, but we can also think about it within the context of biomes. There's lots of tropical plants within rainforest, but now they're reducing. We talked about some of the reasons within Peru why the protected area of the environment might have been being reduced, whether it be to the attempt to get palm oil, whether it be mining, whether it be the attempt to get wood. There's all these kind of different purposes where people are chopping trees down, and that's having a negative effect on the provision of safe space for rainforests to flourish as a biome. Then there's tundra, the coldest biome, and we've got the idea of the polar bear there. About a fifth of the world's surface, of the Earth's surface, so one fifth, 20% of it, and it's so cold. We think it's cold this week. It'll be significantly colder in those tundra locations. Now, again, thinking back to our work on adaptation, thinking about which type of animal could flourish in which type of place. Why could a polar bear not flourish in a rainforest? Why could what kind of animal would survive in a grassland? Why would their colouring help them? What kind of animal would struggle in a forest? Have a think about those different biomes and what kind of animal you think would flourish there.